uniform. They were taped up and cleats were sticking up through your shoes. The helmets had a hole in them. Isn't that right, Seth? It would be outlawed this day, even on a child's playground. But anyway, we did the best we could, and every time we went out of town, you not only had to beat the team, the referees was from that town. You had to beat them, and maybe 2 or 3 fans trying to get out of the gymnasium.
All right, I think we need to stop now and see. Well, I'd like for you to ask, see if you have any questions.
I
Yes.
think we left out Betty Doubleday.
I would like to speak on Betty Doubleday.
All right, all right.
I mean, we've heard of Mr. Shaletta and Betty and Mrs. Miss Bowen, and Betty Doubleday became Betty Doubleday Frost. But I think she was a young teacher when she taught us in the 7th grade, and she was marvelous. She was marvelous. It's just unbelievable. I don't think that one of her strengths was as a disciplinarian. And we were a rowdy bunch anyway, and we would cut up in class. And she would bargain with us, and we would bargain with her. And we would say, we will behave if you will sing to us. And so she would sing to us. She would sing to us. She had the class singing the whole year long. And it was just marvelous. I can't remember anything else that happened that year, but we sang. And it really gave me a love for music. At the end of the year, and that was the 7th grade, going from the 7th grade into the 8th grade was like graduation from elementary school into high school. And she was expected to put her class to put on something special. What do you think she did? She had the 7th graders put on HMS Pinafore, Gilbert and Sullivan. Imagine 7th graders doing that. And she did not have a boy, a 7th grade boy who was masculine enough to be a captain of the ship. But she had a big buxom girl, and she was the captain of the ship, and she bellowed those songs out. Betty Doubleday. Oh, I just can't say enough about Betty Doubleday. Somebody else.
I'll give a side that most people don't know. My sister took music piano from Mrs. Walter Jones, who's Catherine Spivey's mother. And Betty Doubleday would ride with her uptown after school. And I didn't know anything about it. The music book got to my house, and Mom was looking through it, and she came upon this note from Betty Doubleday to Mrs. Jones. And said, "This is one time I'm not giving in to Seth Vining. I'm going to stay here all afternoon." She would make me stay in and say, "I shall not," whatever it was I did, 500 times. Well, that just didn't go well with me. And I'd take 3 or 4 pencils and go like this, you know. So she wouldn't let me do it, so I wouldn't do it. And so we had a little battle like that, but she was a wonderful person, and I needed a few people like that in my life to sort of straighten me out. But going to Miss Baldwin, the teacher that everybody remembers, kept me from flunking out of Duke, I guess, because she's the only teacher I ever had to make me do homework. And if you didn't have it when you came in, you stayed in that afternoon and did it. And so I was trying to play football in my freshman year. I was always late because Miss Baldwin kept me in. And so I finally learned if I was going to get along with her, I had to turn in my homework. And so I got in the habit of doing it. And I really think if I hadn't had her, I'd have come home real quick when I went off to school because she did make me do my homework.
Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I'll add something to that. I don't know how everybody felt about Miss Ballroom, but how she worked through us. I went to Mars Hill. I was going to have to work my way through. I was working in the kitchen, making 17.5 cents an hour. After the first 6 weeks test in history, I was taken out of the kitchen and put to grading papers and coaching classes at 20 cents an hour.
Mrs. Holland had been your teacher. Yeah.
So if it hadn't been for Miss Baldwin, I would have had to work my way through it 17 cents an hour.
I think when you consider we only had 11 grades, and at least up to a certain time.
We were smarter then.
And everybody seemed to have done very well.
I don't want to miss one teacher, was Ann Severe,
Yeah.
who taught all of us English, I think, and is alive in Landrum now, 90-something years old and blind. But she was, we all could not believe her physical ability in one subject. That building was heated by hot steam radiators. And during cold weather, Miss Severe would stand with her back end against the radiator and rock back and forth against the radiator. And you couldn't touch that radiator. And one more about Mrs. Walter Jones. I don't think 5th and 6th grade boys understood the intricacies of ladies' undergarments there. Miss Baldwin Mrs. Jones taught us all music. It must have been a heck of a job. But she was not always popular, so we started putting thumbtacks on her chair, or on her piano bench. And she eventually got known as Mrs. Dead End Jones.
I'd like to know if there are any funny stories related to the little tiny police station.
Okay, if you haven't been here long, right on the corner there of Trade and Packlet, just below the railroad track, there's steps down there. There was a tiny little police station about the size of a telephone booth. And I know you have a story.
They had a phone that rang outside the bell, and so the policemen, they had one car, but they didn't ride in it very often. They walked up and down the street. But they could, if you called the police station, that was where they rang, and you could hear it all up and down the street. And so they would go over and if somebody needed them, they'd get in their car and go to it. Now, we had 2 policemen at that time. We'd stepped up in the world. I don't know how many we have now, but crime really wasn't a factor, because somebody, as Harold said, nobody locked their house or even knew where the keys were, and you just went off. Door open and door closed. And that's something I hated to see go away. But in fact, when we first came back here, our house, we didn't even know we had a key. We just walk off, but it's a good place.
And you didn't tell us about what some of you did.
No, you didn't.
Police station.
Smokestack.
All I remember about the police station was Halloween. They'd get a cigarette lit and put a string of firecrackers, put the fuse in the cigarette and go off and be talking to the policeman. And all of a sudden you go, and they'd run up to see who was setting the firecrackers off. And they never did. As far as I know, they never caught anybody doing it. But that's a way it's pretty good. Happy to try.
Were you the one that dropped the fireworks down the chimney?
No. I can check your cousin Harold.
The telephone company was of interest.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Take it forever.
The telephone system was something. I got home from World War II and landed at the Fish Pier in Boston. And they had a series of telephone booths set up so you can call your family. And I called my family about 7:30 in the evening. And got the operator, Mrs. Watts, Mrs. Rushing. They knew your voices. Oh, you're back home from Europe. I said, yes. And she said, well, I'll ring your house. And there was nobody there. So she rang Mrs. Brantley's house, and there was nobody there. And eventually, I talked to my mother and father
in the ticket office at the theater.
One of the, Judge Barnett used to be a operator there, and I interviewed her not too long ago, and they were talking about everybody going to the fires. She told me that when there was a fire in town, the switchboard would all light up. Just the whole thing would light up. And she knew everybody was calling to say, where's the fire? So she and the other operator with her would just start pulling plugs and say, Mr. Jones' house, Mr. Jones' house, Mr. Jones' house. Any other questions?
You might want to mention Kurt Ergel in connection with football at Tryon High.
You guys talk to that. Go ahead, talk to
Rather, we didn't, Kurt coached the teams when we were away. But he was a volunteer coach during World War II, and none of us were here, but he had some good teams, and he worked lots of boys down at the ice plant to help them go to school and get them scholarships, and he had some good teams, but I don't believe any of us were here when he coached. One thing I would like to say, though, when we were growing up, Harold mentioned the boys club. That really was an outstanding, you think about things being offered now, but nothing is offered now. The way Miss Ann Bosworth Green, one of our northern friends, put up the money, and Dr. Taylor ran it. And we had crafts of all sorts, sports, anything that, hikes, camping trips. We were there from 9 in the morning to 12 till noon, and then if there was any special thing, like field days or whatever, it took longer than that.
In the summer.
This was in the summer. And then when Dr. Taylor did it for 3 years, and then he gave it up, and Mr. Shaletta took over and ran it a couple of years. But it was really excellent training, and it benefited all of us.
I have a picture of Dr. Taylor here, if you would like to see this. He, on the back of the card that he sent to me when I was overseas, if you want to read it, he was a fine feller, and when I was in the service in Falmouth, Massachusetts, at Camp Edwards, my wife was coming up to stay with me for a while, and he found her a place up there. He was that kind of fellow. He called somebody in from the church there, and they had us a place.
Was that not the home friendly club?
Yeah.
Well, his wife ran home
And ran him, ran everybody else.
That's right. Do you remember the yell at Tryon, at the boys club that he had? Rah, 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 ray, Tryon Boys Club every day, right? Now, speaking of these, Mrs. Trowbridge was another person who would write, she wrote to me, I think maybe she wrote to a number of other people too, and she gave strict instructions when we were all in World War II, that she would write to us newsy letters and so forth, but we were never to answer any of these letters. We were never to write and reply. Well, this went on for about a year and a half, and I thought, well, maybe it's time that I could just say thank you for this, for all the letters that she has written to me. And so I wrote her a letter back, and I got this scorching letter back. She said, I told you not to write to me. You're too busy to do that. But she wrote to David Niven in London. I was in a hospital in England, and she said, please be good to this poor boy. So I got a letter from David Niven. She wrote to Lady Astor, please be good to this poor boy. I never made connections with them, but I mean, I thought that was pretty nice.
Talk about smells. When I was growing up, lived just across the railroad tracks from the elementary school there on Lockhart Road, which is right in the city limit. But we had no sewage. Everybody up there had outhouse. And the WPA built us a new outhouse. Made out of heart pine, double cedar, and I can still smell that lumber.
In honor of one of the people on this panel, when we were growing up, the Tryon Daily Bulletin was, what, 5 by 8 inches?
Like a Reader's Digest.
Just about like a Reader's Digest, but only that thick. And it was still that size when I was at the University of Michigan. And the way it was made, it was rolled up to about that big and wrapped in a piece of newsprint with a label on it. I was sitting in the living room at the Fernley House one day when and by the way, I'd get 1 bulletin today, 5 next week, 7 next week. But they always got lost, and eventually they'd show up. But the mailman came in one day and he said, "Can I bother you?" He said, "What is this damn thing?" I showed him one and he kept it.
Yes.
I think your conversation with the telephone company, nobody had any answer machines because the telephone operator would tell you everybody.
Where everybody was, yes.
Yeah, if you were expecting a very important call, you call, you ring in and you say, "I'm expecting a call, but I'm not gonna be here for the next 30 minutes. I'll be somewhere, would you check me over there?" And they would. It was better than any kind of answering service.
And my father ran the telephone company.
It was a dry weather system too. Every time it rained, the phones went out. They would patch them up with inner tubes, old car inner tubes and this and that, but it was a fair weather system.
Any other questions? I know we could be here all afternoon, yes.
Tell us about your Tryon horse. How
Well,
long have you had it?
And for this year.
1928, Vance and Yale, the toy makers. Meredith Langford was in on building the first one. That one burned in the paper box factory, isn't that right? Near the depot. There's been 4 or 5 of them. It was built first as an advertisement for the horse shows, and they would take it up and down the streets on the day of the horse show. And the horse show used to be at Harmon Field on a Wednesday. All the stores closed, the schools closed, and we all went to the horse show.
The thing that happened to the horse, the Tryon horse was kidnapped by a bunch of drunks from Landrum. And was towed off down 176 behind the pickup truck toward Landrum. And it ran off the road and broke its leg, so they shot it.
Then another funny thing I thought happened to